All right, welcome to Plant and App Low Code Campfire episode number 7. And shamelessly, I'm stealing titles from Dr. Seuss books now. Oh, the Google places you'll go, and that's based on a question we got. So that'll be perhaps an interesting topic for today. I'm just going to run through my spiel here. We do this every Friday. It's a community gathering. We get together to share techniques, challenges, experiences. Hopefully somebody brought something to show or has some questions. Everything's recorded out on YouTube, and so you'll be able to find all our past episodes there with at least some bookmarking to find topics. We will be doing introductions, and then we'll be just talking today. So if you have a question, have an idea, a thought on what somebody is presenting, jump in. Make sure that you mute if you've got noise behind you. Keep the meeting where we can all get something out of it. So mute if you can, and courtesy if just letting people talk. It hasn't been a real big problem. I invite you to participate. There's an ongoing threat. One of these days I'll start singing if it gets too quiet. If you have questions or topics for this meeting, you can submit them. I think I've posted this out on when we send the email out as well, but if you want to pull out your camera and snapshot that, if you have anything that you'd like to talk about in the meeting, and I'll prepare a slide, it'll be ready to go. Sometimes I'll even do a little bit of homework for this. So questions and topics get submitted there. And with that, hello, and please, somebody come off mute, say hi to me.
Hello, Dale.
Mark.
Dale.
Hi, Dale.
Welcome back.
Good morning, Dale.
Hello, Craig. I'm sorry, is it Julian? I'm calling you out here, but I don't think I've seen you join our campfire before, so I just wanted specifically to say hi. And if you want to introduce yourself to the group, that would be great.
Hi, John. I'm indeed new to the group. I'm just watching the progress, and I'm interested in how the development works.
Well, I'm glad.
I got an invite from Bogdan.
Oh, good.
That's cool.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you joined us. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but we try and do this pretty informally. I don't know if you've listened to any of our YouTubes yet, but it's a pretty informal thing. Are you hoping to sit back and listen? Do you have anything that's going on development-wise that you wanted to ask about? Any particular thing we can help you with today?
For now, I just want to listen and learn a little bit about how you build a coding part. I'm more interested in the custom code part.
Custom code part. Good. Well, we'll be diving in a little bit to some of that today, but in any case, we're glad that you joined us, and again, sorry if I put you on the spot. We just wanted to say hi. It's like I say, pretty informal.
No problem. I've been using a little bit the app and added 2 entities and some custom code, JavaScript. Yep. Use some tokens, and I don't know. I was interested in a deeper perspective from
Great.
Someone who really knows the development process and what can be built and added to custom code.
So
So
since you mentioned custom code, I wanted to make sure you knew we did some recorded videos. It was really back about Christmas time, and I could help you find them. But we spent quite several weeks on our Wednesday webinar, Low Code Cafe, talking about customizations and the different ways that you can do in code. So you might go back to our YouTube channel and look at things in about the November, December area, I think is where we were doing that, of 2020.
I will take a look.
Good.
Thank you.
Great. I see that we have Chad. I think this is your first time on with us. Is that correct?
Yeah, my first campfire here.
All right. Chad Weiss is a new member to Campfire, a new member to the Plantain App group. Joined us in recent days and is going to be working on sales and pre-sales type activities. Do you want to say anything about what your role is going to be? And also I want to mention Chad has he has a new background now with Plantain App, but he's got a deep background with .NET Nuke.
Oh, sorry, I accidentally hit the unmute there by mistake.
Yep.
Yeah. So thanks for the intro there. So my role here at Plantain App is the sales engineer role as well as an account executive role. So essentially, everything sales is what I'm going to be picking up and taking over here. This is just ending off my second week now. So next week, everybody might be hearing from me if automated emails go out in the wrong fashion, by meaning if they go out to people who have already signed up for stuff, because we're looking for the new setup there. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I do have a background from the DNN Corp side, so very familiar with Evoke. Been there for over 5 years, I think about 5.5 years until moving over to Plantain App. So it's nice learning something new for a change, and actually going in and seeing the other side of the DNN community, because as you know, there's corp and then there was community, and there was always that bit of a clash between the two. And I found myself being quite friendly with everyone and always found that nice middle ground. And now I get to see, in my opinion, the better side of it. So I'm really enjoying it so far, and playing around with Plantain App has been a lot of fun. I'm actually trying to build out a invoice type generator just to make my life a little bit easier for a few things, where it pulls in a set number of sales, pulls out the amount on all those sales, creates invoices, and yeah, just trying to do things probably, I'd say, the harder way, as you could just make it a single entity with a ton of fields, but I want to make it more complicated in the sense that it's going to be better and easier to use in different areas. More
Yep.
small apps rather than one big app kind of thing. Or not apps, I should say, sorry, entities.
Sounds like you're trying to figure out how we make the dog food so we can sell it well.
Exactly.
Good. All right. Well, glad that you're joining this group. And with that, I'm going to go on to the Campfire section. This is open. There's a couple of people, and I really appreciate it. There were a couple of people that had added some questions. One was homework from the end of last time. One was somebody submitted a question, and we can get into specific techniques. So we've got a couple of things in my pocket to talk about, but in the meantime, what else is going on? Who's got either something they want to share or something that is bugging them? What's going on?
No singing, Dale.
Well, like I say, I have two topics to talk about, so before we get to that part, but at least that much. All right.
Nothing specific this time, Dale.
Okay, well, so, let's dive in on my topics, and if something else comes up along the way, we'll do that. So we had one, we were left off last time, and I suspected this was the case, but I hate to say stuff without actually knowing. So the question was talking about when you're in Plantain App and you've got the users and what's the difference between the .NET Nuke users and the Plantain app users features? And then there was also a question about, can we dynamically create a user correctly and getting the user on the Plantain app list? So this one turned out to not be that complex, but we can cover it here. In the Plantain app users list, what's being shown is users that are in the Plantain app roles. So we have the Plantain app roles that are showing here, and so long as a user exists in .NET Nuke and has a Plantain app role, they show up on this list. So if you're seeing a discrepancy between the users list, which is here, and the Plantain app list, see, I've got more than the 3 that we're showing. The difference is what roles they're in. So let's see if I can pick one and I'm going to see if I can see what's there and what's missing. So we got test 2 support. So I think, let's see, I think this test user support at plantainapp.com is not on the list. Let me just verify that. So it's not showing up on this list. If we were to go in through .NET Nuke and go to that user, and oh, this might be a super user, which is part of the problem. Yeah, see these. Okay, we'll just add one. Actually going to send an email to it. So we have a user called new user. So if we look in our users list, we have new user. If we refresh our Plantain app users list, they don't show up. It doesn't show up. And the only difference is if we go into that user and assign new, if we go in and add role, and we add one of the roles like users or managers. Let's add new user as a manager. And so I don't need to send this email. These hover boxes get me. So we've added him to the manager role, and now when we refresh, he's going to show up. So new user 1 shows up here. So when you're creating things within .NET Nuke, the users that have one of our roles will show up on now the users and the users tab of Plantain app. If you create them here, if you go in and say new user, we automatically assign role. They get users, plus they can get these, you can assign them to others. So they're automatically added. And so it's kind of seamless if you do it through our side. They will always be showing up on the users tab. But the conflict comes in when you have users outside of Plantain app. They're a .NET Nuke user, but not having the role. So then back to the second part of the question, can we create them? I built a form. We'll look at the actions in a second, but let's do new user 6. And so this form will fill it in. Very simply, and we say create the user, and it did that for us. And so now if we go back into configuration, wherever that is, and look at users, we can see it got created here. And so it's certainly possible to do this programmatically if you want to dynamically create a user. And it really just amounts to doing the same thing, creating a user, making sure that they get assigned to the role. So from a program standpoint, let's see what that, I lost my page here. Let's find it again. User creation. So if I were to edit this form, we'll do it over here on Page Builder. If I edit my registration form, we have fields, first name, last name, email, user, password, and the loading bar. But the button Create User has just a few actions. First, we do a user registration action, and user registration, you give it the username, the password, and these are coming from the fields on the form. So we can really just point them to the right things. Match email to email, first name, last name, whether or not you want the emails to go out. But this action will set them up. You can set them up as authorized or ready to go, or don't authorize. And so by default, we wanted to create a user that was ready to use. So this one action creates the user, but doesn't give them any roles. And then the next step is that grant user role, which we'll look at in a second, requires that we're in the perspective of the user. So we have to be the user before we can add a role for that user. So we use load user to say what user we're talking about. We pick the username that was assigned here, which was the same one that they picked off the entered on the screen. So this lets us act as if we were that user or in the context of that user. And now we say grant user role, and I granted the user's role. We could have as easily, if we wanted to also be able to make them be a manager, we can just repeat this, and maybe we would do this as as a manager. So this would allow them to have a couple of roles, and if you only wanted them to be for a period of time, there's an option for that as well. But we grant the user role, and so we create the user, load it, grant user role. All those are things that are built into the Plantain app product. So this form then, I'm not going to save my changes to this, but this form then demonstrates that you can easily create a user. And that could be done programmatically. It doesn't have to be in response to something added on the screen. It's just anywhere we can put it in action stack. I can't remember, were any of you part of that question or discussion last week?
Yeah, Dale, this is Mark. Yeah, I was part of that, and that is very helpful. And we can all make a form like that. Another part of the question was, I think we could have accomplished all this except for the password field already in the Plantain app environment. So part of the question was, why can't we just create our own password in the Plantain app environment? It seems like a simple add. If you guys added one field, then we wouldn't have to build our own forms.
Right. So we do a new user. We only ask for email, first name, last name, and users. So that would probably end up being, I bet Reza could give us a great answer to that question, but it wouldn't surprise me if we ended up answering that from a security standpoint. We want to build the core product as securely as we can. And if we set it up where you can enter a password, then that means that somebody knows the password. In your circumstance, that might be appropriate, but in other circumstances, it's not. So we may be doing it that way. I'll ask the question. Better start writing.
Sure, I think there's plenty of use cases where you need to be able to do that. Like when you're making a user account that you want to play with.
Yep.
That's your own self, and that seems pretty appropriate that you want to know what the password was.
Right. And so within that, then, from a built-in answer, the thing I was going through in the first place, doing it DNN and persona bar, it has that built in. through our app, it's a more stringent process. The email would point them to a reset. And by the way, you could do it here and then access the reset, but it's just I agree, it is a pain to have to when your use case is you just want a user to play with, and being able to do that without having to go through a bunch of extra steps makes sense. I'll get an answer, but my bet is that we're trying to default to a secure scenario.
Answer accepted.
Okay. Well, I like having homework. I will check on that.
So could you go in through the DNN side and in the option where you can automatically assign role, if you set up a generic customer role or something with that, and you set them up on the DNN user and create?
My bet to that is going to be that if you want if it's going to be a Plantain app user, that the right way to do it would be to create a new role within our roles mechanism, so that we know about it and know that it's part of Plantain app, right? If you and I think when you do that, you'll be able to add this will end up being you'll be able to. The reason that you would have another role in the Plantain app side would be so that you could define custom security for that role.
Right.
What they're able to do through the entity's permissions. If you define it, you have the what we've been talking about. Yes, you could do it all through the DNN interface. If it's not a Plantain app role, you're going to end up they're not going to show up on users. So
But I thought in the DNN interface that you could tell it you wanted a new user always assigned to a particular role. And if you went into roles, created we now have the new all users DNN role. If we added, when we created a new user, we added them there, would they then show up?
So that's a great question. I am unfamiliar with that setting. Do you know where we say that they always get created with roles?
I will go search for it here while we're talking. I don't know it right offhand. I know it.
Let's see if
I think it's under roles. If you go to roles, you can set it by what.
Yeah, because on an individual role, if you hit the edit pencil on any of the roles, let's just go with, say, the left menu full, for instance, because that's not an out-of-the-box role, or even members, that would work too. At the bottom, there's an auto assignment, and once turned on, there's also going to be the option to add to existing users as well.
Yeah.
So I was just looking into this, and I was actually just messaging Reza. He might be jumping on the Campfire here with us in a moment. It looks like I'm using version 1.14 right now with my testing and learning, and I created a user in the persona bar, and it automatically added the user's role to that user, allowing it to show up in the Plantain app users. So I was trying to find out what version that fix appears to be in, and I haven't quite found that yet. My guess is 1.14, but it could have been in 1.3 or an older version as well.
So I see I was trying to look here, we don't, that user's role doesn't
So
appear.
if you hit load more on yours, it might appear there. Yeah, there it is, perfect.
All right. So just for fun, let's see if we can do this. If we auto assign to users, and then we go back to my code here, and we'll comment everything else out. So we're on our create user. We'll do our create user, but we'll false that and don't grant any roles. So we'll false that. So it's only going to create the user with the password. So save that, X out, refresh. So this will be 99. create and go to configuration, users, and they show up with the role assigned. So that's an easier way to make sure that they automatically get into the list. You can turn that on. That's a good answer. Doesn't solve the password question. So Reza, since you came on, now I'm going to put you on the spot. When we go in, can you give us any reasoning why when we create a new user through our interface that we're not prompting for password? I speculated it might be from a security standpoint that we want users to set their own, but
yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to handle this, and people are going to do it different, but that essentially it puts the user management in the control of the user. Something we're actually working on in the release 115 right now is giving a little love to this users page. And so including the ID, giving you a password reset button so you can go and like generate it out to reset for them.
the use case
Why not let us set a default for them here?
Yeah. The use case that Mark was talking about was, hey, I want to create a user to play around with. And if you do it through our interface, you don't have the password. Now you got to go through reset. And quite honestly, there will be scenarios where people will create, it's not a high security environment. The admin will create a password and give it to the user and say, here's your login. And so, again, my answer was we default to kind of this putting the burden on the user, but in some cases that's not going to be necessary.
Yeah, so I guess, there's persona bar, there's like roll your own, or there's persona bar, because then there's like this UI. I mean, the honest answer is probably because when this was first rolled out, this was kind of what was needed to get it out the door, right? And it's functional, and kind of just, if people want to see that, I've noticed it too when I first started working with it, and you get used to having that capability from persona bar. What I usually do, like I'm in that boat too, I'm making a test user or something and I don't want to go through all this and incognito windows and all that kind of stuff. I'll just do it in persona bar and then give them, they should get the user's role by default. I kind of came into this mid screen share. What the setting you checked for the role, I think it's supposed to auto assign that role already, is it not? Or is this to pick it up for past users?
Okay, so what we were talking about was there's the doing it through the interface. Yes, if you create a new user, they're going to get users automatically, can't turn it off. But if you do it through .NET Nuke, persona bar, or in my case, I was doing it programmatically, if you don't have that user's automatic assign checked, it gets created without a role, and so it's not on the users list. It's only on we only show on the users tab people who are in one of our roles.
Yeah, so if you go real quick, go to the roles in the persona bar. Persona bar, sorry. And then show like all roles, not just the global. So see how users has auto assign on, and so it should be, DNN should be taking care of that.
In my instance, which is admittedly one that I've upgraded from a couple of versions back, but it was not checked.
Okay, yeah, we did that I think in 113.
You automatically check.
And so the migration script, even from 12 to 13, will update this setting. So, but yes, in the meantime, setting it will at least help with new users you create, I believe, from anywhere. You still have to contend with, well, what about like this stack of users I had if you were had already created them, or they were carryovers from a site that got upgraded or something.
Yep. So in our case, in my case, I developed a little form that allows you to create a user and assign a password, but it also I used the grant role, And so you could still use grant role, for example, to assign the optional ones, the manager or low code engineer or something. But with the default configuration that we've arrived at, it's or the configuration we now have arrived at, it's assigning users. It does, .NET Nuke does that work. And they could assign managers. So the technique that I demonstrated could be useful if you want to auto create somebody. And so it sounds to me like Mark would, if he had a chip, a white ball, he would put it down on, yeah, can you prompt for the password for me? It's, you know, obviously there's a workaround, but I think he would put the.
Yeah, so then I would say, like, then we get in, first thing that pops in my mind is, then what if you want to also, you know, just think persona bar here. Then it's going to say, hey, do you want the user to have to change the password when they log in? Otherwise,
how deep do we go?
Right.
And this is our kind of an ongoing conflict that we have. We're trying to extract things so people don't have to use the persona bar. But if you don't bring everything over, then they might have to end up using it anyway.
Yeah, if you go to the users tab, so here's an alternative I would propose. This is an action grid, essentially, right? But the form, when you say new, is not. It is actually a form that is built by the developers and managed, so this is not action form. And I guess because it's doing some highly secure stuff and creating users and all of this kind of thing, but this could easily, I believe, be replaced with an action form. And then you can adjust this form to your liking, right? And happy to put, I think the password stuff is genuine, same as like the ID is not here and there's not a reset password button. There's some out of the box additions we should do. But then I wonder if, like we've kind of talked, I think in this setting in the past, about giving you all the ability to kind of clone off with an interface, like, hey, I want to take over user management, make a copy of all this stuff so that next time I upgrade, like, you could go and change this grid, you could put your own form on it right now. I think though the next time you upgrade, it's going to override and reset you to our state. So we need the ability to kind of keep ours updated, but say, hey, if you've branched off, you might want to pick up or add in these changes if we changed it. Otherwise, though, it's still your specialized flow for creating users.
Yep.
And then
So
you can do whatever you want.
Sounds to me like it's, I mean, A, it's not broken, but B, we could give it some more attention, decide what we want in the core product, and then C, love it that there's the ability to roll your own. So.
So, but received.
So we answered the question, why don't they show up? You got to have a DNN role. And so that I appreciate that Chad and others know more than I did and know that we can make that assign by default. And there's a checkbox to say, do it for everyone on the system. And so you could handle that very quickly. And then dynamic creation definitely will work. We've covered the password question. Okay, so in all that, does that bring up a topic for anyone else, or shall I go on to my next question? Okay, now I'm just going to warn, this is the last question I have, so when we run out of this next one, then we will be singing. Nope, that's not it. So I got a question from an email that was asking using Google Places on a form item, and then how can I get the street number, extract all the wonderful data from Google Places out and use it. And so I hadn't used the Google Places form field type before, so I learned something new. I appreciate the question. So let's see if I can find that. First of all, has anybody used Google Places?
I don't think I have either. I've used Maps.
Okay, so Google Places, I'm going to cover the form, and then we'll cover what has to happen behind the scenes to get this stuff out of here. So let's look at the definition of of Google Places. It's pretty straightforward. You drop a Google Places item on the field type on the form. it's called Google Places. What do we want to get out of it? It's got my super secret API key. It's locked down to plant an app, so I don't care if you see it or not. What do you want to get out of it? These are checkboxes, so we turn on and off things that we want to get. And so main thing that I turned everything on so I could see it, but main thing I want to get is the address component. But you can get more fields out of it. These come at a different rate, the atmosphere field, so price and rating and review and whatever. So if this were a business, you'd get more stuff out of it. If the thing that you select is a business. So that's the definition. And so when you, whoops, result type. So
Dale, you said this was a field type to put on the in action form?
Correct. If you say add field, you can say Google Places.
Okay.
And so in a minute, I'm gonna. So now I'm looking at all the options, and there's a very good chance I did this the hard way because I picked. I accepted the defaults, and so we'll take a look at what this returns and all the steps I went through to parse it, and then maybe we'll take a look at another one and see if a different result type would have made it easier to do. I often do things the hard way before I learn the easy way. So if you, this is my real address if anybody wants to come by. And I added this, that's the button, I added a parse address button. When I click it, it's pulling out all the different parts and pieces out of the JSON that we got back from Google. And so the challenge really was that this JSON that came back is not very friendly for just picking out these parts and pieces. It takes several steps to do it. So I think before I even talk about let's see. Before I even talk about my solution, I'm going to see what happens when we change to the what gets returned, because there may be so I got a mixed answer. I'm going to instead flip it to address, because if this is the easy way, I'm going to wish I hadn't spent 2 hours trying to figure that out. So I'm going to pick out the same address and parse it, and it still works. So there wasn't, that tells me that there wasn't anything that it nicely returned. The JSON components are still, so I don't know quite what it was doing differently. Maybe it's filtering down a little bit, but so there's going to be room to play with that some more. I'm going to put this back the way it was so that it's exactly the same. So Google Places, we'll leave it at the default of mixed, save, refresh. Now, one thing that's interesting about this, you actually have to pick something off the list. If you don't pick it and hit parse address, it comes back with an error. You actually have to say, and even that much, I'm not sure it's going to work. No, it did. All right. So, but once you actually pick a place, then Google, it will happily return back the content. So let me show you the problem that this data represents, and then what I did to solve it. I'm using Code Beautify to help me visualize this data better, because, well, JSON without beautification is kind of hard to read. So it returns back these address components individually, and and they're just out there in a pretty, instead of saying the street number is this and the the locality is that, it puts it into an array. And so you're going to have to end up parsing through the array. If we look at the rest of what they provided, we have an address thing that has, that's formatted with span, HTML span tags. And then we have a formatted address, which would be very nice to put in a file, for example, but it doesn't parse out the parts. And I don't know that you can just guarantee that, for example, dividing on the commas and things like that are going to get where you want to go, and a non-US address might be completely different. So this doesn't really help. This name is not formatted. So we really needed to go to the components, and parsing through the address components, because it's an array, presented some challenges. So I'll just talk through what I ended up. It really, it really did take a couple hours to go through and find the answer. But as a result, I'll put this stack of actions out on a document that will connect to the recording on how I got this to happen. But I'll walk through here. And of course, I displayed some things like all elements and the JSON that got returned. That wouldn't be part of what would be a final thing. Those are kind of debugging things so that we can look at it and work with it. But all the magic happens in parse address. So we got a button. A button has this stack of actions. This first one is just debugging only. It says that the thing that came back from Google Places, will put it in JSON return so we can see it. So this isn't part of the answer. The first thing that we do is parse Google Places into JSON parts, and that goes into GP1. So that's getting us so we can access the address components specifically. We look in the next thing, we parse the address components, and we turn it into an entity, because we're going to need to loop through the entity. So GP1 address components right here gets turned into an entity, and it's called GP entity, Google Places entity. So now we can walk through that entity. When you execute actions on an entity list, each one of these items, long name, short name, type, long name, short name, type, each one will be presented to actions that can be processed. So we loop through the entity, and in that, now we got a lot of actions again. The first one is that I take all the elements, and I'm building up this debug results. This is debug, not part of solution. It's end up showing the individual components so we can see what's there, and it was just part of my debugging process. But what we do is get the long name, the short name, and the types array, and put that into a thing called a GP entity, which we can now work with. We parse. Oh, there's a chance that I didn't need that. Let's see if that's not part of the solution. Yeah, this might not be part of the solution either. Okay, so we are getting something called type.js, component types. Well, here's where the work happens. If type.js is equal to street number, so as each element is going by, as it's looping through these, it's saying, well, if the type is street number, and that would be here. If the type, the first element of type is called street number, then the street number is the component long name.
Hey, Dale, I see that you have like type.js:0. Can you talk about that?
Yep, so some of these, and this may not be a 100% solution, but some of these elements that they're returning, it's also, well, the type is an array. And so by saying if type:0 is equal to street number, I'm pulling the 0th item, the first item, from type and saying what is it. So it's street number. they've done it as an array. And again, we're just reacting to what Google does. They've done it as an array. It would be nice if they didn't, but it's both a locality and a political in this case. So we have to say, well, we have to deal with the fact that there are multiple elements in this. It is set up as an array, so we must go for the 0th element. Is that what you were calling attention to, Reza? Yeah.
Thanks. It was just, I discovered that like a few weeks ago myself and was like, man, where was that all these years?
And so if I really wanted to do this in a bulletproof way, what I'm doing now, my logic is looking at the 0th one. So locality, if it's locality, then I'm going to grab Forney. The problem is that there's really no guarantee what order an array kind of thing looks like. So if I wanted to be bulletproof about it, I would say if type 0 is locality or type 1 is locality, or better yet, loop through the types. But you're pretty well, what I have works. It's just not bulletproof. If they were to rearrange or to not include at least one, it might blow up or not work correctly.
Mm.
But they are providing at least one in every case, and I'm taking the first one, and it seems to reliably grab it. So, component. This is needed. This. Yeah, nope, this is part of the solution. We do need component, so that is part of the solution. So this, so step by step at the end here, we're doing if the type 0th element is street number, then I'm saving to the street number field the component long name. The reality is the difficulty in all this is that this JSON is not really friendly. I don't understand why Google did it this way. They're smarter than I am. But then we can repeat that for all the different elements that we want to pull out. And so, you know, at the end we do you know, you type in something and it's pulling all these elements out. So just for, first of all, questions on how far I got there, and then we could probably do something else. I was going to enhance this one little bit in that I pulled out the zip code, but not the postal code suffix. So stop me if you have a question. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on with, I'm going to pull out the suffix, right? We've got the zip code, but we don't have the suffix if you wanted the suffix. So easy enough.
My question is sort of a general one on the parsing this kind of JSON. I get some very complex JSON arrays like this coming back to me. And I have not tried to go through and parse them on the web server. I've taken the JSON and passed it off into SQL Server and done it over there. And just performance-wise, I mean, you're doing 5 fields here. You know, do you think the parsing in here is going to be as efficient or more efficient than doing it off on a SQL side? If you had a huge, you know, you're doing one-on-one. I have 50,000 JSON rows coming back to me from a vendor.
Yep. So the answer is I don't really know. I suspect, especially, you know, SQL Server does a lot of stuff right. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's a good answer. The question is, you know, it's all what's coming back and what do you want to do with it? Are you pushing that into a table, for example?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. And so almost certainly this, the thing that I'm doing is going to be steps and looping that's happening. You know, it's going to be a couple of levels, layers of stuff added on, versus if you got 50,000 records and, you know, you parse them and push them to a table at one time, I'm betting that SQL is going to be faster.
You know, it depends though too, because I mean, it depends what version of SQL. I know that I think it was like 2016 is when they finally got some brains, like the system got some brains about what is JSON. You can actually query for JSON and things like that. Prior to that, it was a lot of like function writing and stuff. Once Dale shows this, if we're on this topic, I had encountered something similar in something I built once, and I have a workflow that does server-side JavaScript to do what Dale's doing here. And I'll show that maybe in a second. That I would think performs better than this, just because you're having to sequentially run the actions one by one and conditionally. Whereas here I'm going I can kind of navigate the JSON array in JavaScript a lot easier than with these actions, and just go like, I want these things out of there. And I can dig in deep like Dale's doing. But it all happens in one action, and I just get everything I need out. And now I can do stuff with it, you know, and we can take a look at that. That I'm almost positive, because it's server-side JavaScript, is going to run better than these actions would.
Where are these actions actually running, Reza?
These run server-side as well, but they're running through like our action parsing logic, which, you know, there's a whole lot going on there. And so these are like C# technically, but with a lot of layers of stuff. So it's handy for you got like a couple things you want to pluck out, or I mean, they're great. But in the case like you're talking about, or the one I had, where there's just this wall of stuff, mixed type of content, and I needed like 10 of the fields out of 100, I was able to swoop in one action in JavaScript and pull everything I needed out.
I'll just jump in and say I'd love to see an example of that. I've done some stuff where I've wanted to parse the JavaScript, so I've written my own custom action, but I think you guys do have like a JavaScript action. I'd love to see the ins and out of that.
Awesome. Well, I'll show it in a second.
Well, yeah, so if you'll look that up and let me know when you're ready, I'll.
Oh, I have it.
Oh yeah, you're ready? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so then I'll just say, you know, while we were talking, I grabbed +4 out of the data. It's once you have the pattern of extracting the stuff out of the data, it's really pretty easy to grab the next piece. So
yeah, this is just a super handy in general feature or thing to have, that like the filling in the address automatically for people. In the past, I know the post office has an API for it and stuff, but it's a little bit clunky and it costs money to work with. Question I had for you real quick on this Google Places thing, Dale, and that key, do they put limits or anything on how many times? Because I mean, I could see going through a big list and like having a workflow and just be like, look, go and take a whole big list of one-line addresses that I got off some other place and break them up and populate my table correctly, you know?
yeah, so the limits, I'm sure there are limits. We've linked to the Google Maps platform to see that, but the basic data appears to be 0. Right?
Yeah, it's incredible.
The additional data comes at a little bit more. So, and I'm going to actually use the link here. And I just thought it'd be fun to do it. So let's look at contact data. So contact data is 0.003 cents per request. So, you know, that's part of the limits, right? When you start asking for this additional data, you got a little price tag associated with it. But what I've done is turned them all on for the purposes of this. Let's see, I'm just kind of curious what all they're going to reveal about me, what all we can then build into our app, right? So I'm going to use the same mechanism to parse the address, but now hopefully there's some more information in here that when we paste it and look at it, we can see what more they gave us. Really? Oh, my thing might only be showing address components. So what we're going to need to change this up a little bit.
Dale, did you have to plug in your own Google API key for this, or is PlantNet handling all of that?
No, I did. I had to sign up for Google API key, and it tells you where to go to find or create one. But I covered it real quick. I plugged in my own, and it's limited to plantandapp.com applications, so I don't care if you saw it. So let's see. JSON returned my button is getting, yeah, it's getting everything from Google Places going to JSON returned. So I don't really
Thought I
know.
saw in there like your time zone and offsets and UTC. Was that there before?
Well, let's see in just a second. I might have, it might have been there and I didn't see it. I don't tap dance real well, so let's do this.
So I think a lot of those extra fields may relate to businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So if I put a
Probably.
business address in the chat to you, Dale, then we have a Google data business account there that people use for us. So if you want-
Sure. So let's let me see if I can find that chat.
Well, it was in the message or the here. What window did I take?
There it is. Actually, we'll see how good Google is here. At 5650.
There.
There it is. Okay, so we parse it. Parsing is good. Get the JSON. Lots of stuff. Okay. So
Wow.
we got a map when they're open.
You could do some really neat, powerful stuff with this. Like if someone's looking for, I'm just giving a basic example, but like somewhere to eat near me that's open and serves this kind of food. And, I run into situations sometimes that might not be the best example, but you find a list of results and then you're having to go and look at this kind of, I want someone to fix my air conditioner that has this many ratings at least and is rated this high. And
Hey, the staff was super nice. And so we have some reviews, and it's a store, it's an establishment, where it is on the map, 143 ratings at your website. So you do get a ton of data back if you want to. So thanks for that. Good point, Jim. You need to point to an establishment. So and notice that all that extra information didn't break the address components that we had. It actually did what we were trying to do, but we could pull out a lot more, and then you can do something with that, right? So however you act on it. Okay, I am going to give up the share here, and I think Reza is going to show us.
yeah, I see our time, so I'll do the quick version of it, but then maybe next week I can pull out this and do a little bit more of a generic workflow. So just the quick of it, this is from an app that was calculating like stock returns and stuff like that. And so there's an API call that you can give it a ticker symbol and it brings you back this wall. And you can see it's like, for a company and it's real time, market data, but then it's got like these components and stuff kind of nested in an array like you've got there, Dale. So what I have here is a workflow where I was like, okay, out of all that stuff, and it was funny because in a different workflow, I just wanted my own JSON, right? That I could pick my pieces out of real easy and stuff. So I make the thing, I get it, and I basically do two JavaScript actions. One is to parse it. So this right here is just JavaScript to take the JSON and turn it, parse it into something that I can work with. And like you here, some type of technique where I'm getting the first result back, because there could have been multiples that they gave me, like several companies worth. But in this case, I know it's always only one, so I'm targeting that first one. So now I've got that in JavaScript loaded up, and then now I can run another JavaScript that basically is saying, hey, I got this object from the last one, right? Do a JSON.parse on it. So this is JavaScript native code, right? And then I return and I'm able to just go and say, these are my variables that I want to come back out of this. And I'm just targeting my object here and navigating. I can navigate anywhere in the tree of it, of whatever complexity it has in there and stuff like that. So I could go deeper and pull things out without having to loop and stuff like that. if I know the number of it or something, or I could write a JavaScript loop that says this one I know contains multiple elements, go grab them all for me and call them, you know, variable 1, variable 2 as you're looping, whatever.
How is JSON STR getting set? Is that just set because of the JavaScript from your previous task, or is that defined as some sort of input?
Yeah, how does
Did that make sense what I was saying?
Yeah. So it's basically the output of the API call to get the JSON. So this API returns me JSON. So I'm like, hey, just call whatever it gives me back. I know it's JSON, put it in JSON str. So I have a string full of JSON, but like my world doesn't really know that's JSON. It's just a string. So here I turn it into parsable JSON and return, like, I just parse it. Actually, I'm just doing the same thing I'm doing the other one here. I'm just getting the full quote. This is like everything they gave me back as JSON. And then this is just the stuff I wanted out of it. And so I'm again saying, hey, I got this object where I'm going to be parsing JSON. That's the nature of what I'm doing here. And this is the string. And now I can go and dig in. And so when I run this, I think we'll say like Google maybe. And so this is everything they're giving me back, right? But then this is just me building up my own JSON string that it's easy for me to work with in my next action or whatever. And it's not their format, it's mine. So I kind of pulled out the pieces I want. So then I'm not wading through info I don't want downstream in my app. And I know that I can count on these things being there because I'm the one setting it up and giving it, you know?
Cool. So just making sure I understand specifically on the execute JSON action, if you could open that up again, that one, yep, parsing. So JSON str is the name of a variable within the environment.
Yeah, so think of normally what we're used to is you would see it like this, right? In our normal stuff, right? But in the case of inside this JavaScript, anything that is available as a token is available natively as a variable in here. You don't need the brackets.
Very cool.
So if I passed in input parameters into my workflow, like let's say ticker symbol, right? I don't do bracket ticker symbol. I would just write ticker symbol. It all is turned into JavaScript variables. I could also define and load my own variables that will then be accessible down here as well and use token syntax for the value, like my tokens or whatever. Yeah. This is super, super powerful.
Well, and really, so for me, my next step would be to take my same solution and put it into this kind of a structure, just to learn that technique. And it's kind of interesting. We all kind of approach the world in a different way. Jim mentioned a minute ago that he's parsing it by SQL Server, and I kind of approach the world largely as SQL. So I often go that direction. If the tool that's in your toolbox is JavaScript, then the solution that you have is there. And then if you just want native .NET Nuke, if you want native plant and app controls and looping, that works too. So I kind of showed one technique, but we're up to at least 3.
Yeah, and so where I'm using that, this is a different workflow now where the first one was go get me all this stuff about a company, right? But then I need to so I do that, and it's returning to me that shortened, remember I said I just want my own, I know what I want. And so here then, all I do is feed the payload of the other one, which is just JSON, and I parse it into tokens. And now instantly I have tokens out of what I've wanted. So now in my where I'm using the stuff, all I got to do is call a workflow, and the workflow is giving me back specifically the things I care about a company. But this was all just parsed into tokens here, you know? Yep.
So your first level one, you've redefined your JSON too to be standard names. So as you go downstream from that to other workflows, you don't have to worry that vendor A calls it an item and vendor B calls it a SKU, and then.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, I am going to call this a very good campfire. Thanks for guesting there, Reza, and everyone sharing techniques. Good deal. Happy Friday. Happy low coding. And we will see you again next week. Send me questions. We'll get them on the agenda.
Indeed. Maybe we can pull a couple of those workflows, that technique out into a couple very generic workflows that people could take in and be like, oh, let me tweak this now. But you'll see how the basics, you see it's just a couple actions and some JavaScript. So
Absolutely.
all right.
All right. Thank you all.